Hi, welcome to Investigations in Ritual Abuse. I am your host, Goel, and these are the latest updates on the Hamlin case. We've got some ground to cover here, so I'm going to jump right into it. The first update that we need to make our readers apprised of is that in October of 2023, Governor Cox appointed Ryan Peters, the Juab County prosecutor and the special prosecutor in the David Lee Hamlin criminal case and the Roselle Stevenson criminal case, to a juvenile court judgeship in the 4th District Court. Now, Peters was appointed as a special prosecutor in the Hamlin case due to the obvious conflict of interest with the Utah County Attorney's Office, headed by David Levitt. And what this development means for the Hamlin case, it means that the Hamlin case currently has no prosecutor. Ryan Peters was the only authorized special prosecutor, and he filed a motion to transfer the case back to the Utah County Attorney's Office, which is no longer headed by David Levitt. Now, Judge Roger Griffin in American Fork denied the motion to transfer the Hamlin case to the Utah County Attorney's Office for prosecution, and his grounds for doing so was to say that there were still employees connected to David Levitt, including employees who had an acrimonious relationship with David Levitt, and therefore the prosecution could not be fair and impartial in the case, even though Levitt is no longer in office and he is not a current defendant in the case. There is a possibility that he could be a defendant in the future. The discovery motions that were filed, beginning with the October 2023 motion to compel discovery, made a proffer of some evidence distilled from hundreds of pages of documents. That's the quote from that motion. According to the defense, prosecutors in Utah County declined to prosecute multiple times between 1999 and 2003 because they did not believe that the allegations made by the Hamlin sisters were credible. The defense timeline alleges that Rachel Hamlin did not report abuse until April 23rd, 2000, and the prosecutors declined to bring charges 18 months later in December 2002 because the Hamlin sisters did not disclose abuse at the beginning, and because disclosure only came after therapy with Hugh Allred, who utilized hypnosis. The Hamlin sisters will later accuse Allred of being a member of the LDS Church of Satan. Now, in their later victim statements, it is apparent that the sisters say that they did not recover their memories under hypnosis, but it is a known fact that Hugh Allred did utilize hypnosis in his therapy practice and that he was one of their therapists during the divorce proceedings. The Hamlin sisters later accused Allred of being a member of the LDS Church of Satan, and they insisted that the proceedings in the divorce and custody fight between their parents were stage managed by the gatekeepers of the LDS Church of Satan, embedded in the political, legal, and mental health establishments of the state of Utah. Now, the defense timeline alleges that Eliza Hamlin's physical examination from 2002 showed a completely normal vagina and anus without evidence of trauma. This apparently was a critical factor in the prosecution's 2002 decision to decline to prosecute. What the defense neglects to mention is that David Lee Hamblin apologized to his daughter for raping her during a recorded phone call before his arrest in the 2012 to 2014 case. Worse still, the prosecution failed to rebut the October 2023 defense motion with that same tape conversation in which David Lee Hamblin confesses to raping his daughter and apologizes for his actions. So the prosecution has their ace in the hole, but they don't bring it in. So the defense further alleges that the investigators on the case discussed the Hamlin sisters standing by their 2012 victim statements to a degree. In another footnote in one of the motions, they say that the girls are retracting their statements. In later motions, it becomes clear that the investigators discussed the case with Roselle Stevenson, even though she was a suspect under investigation, and they divulged information that was damaging to the prosecution and discrediting to the corroborating witnesses, Rachel and Eliza Hamblin. There's no good reason for them to do this, but apparently they did do it. And in doing so, they provided the means for the defense to access those discussions or that information, because by discussing it with Roselle Stevenson as a third party, it was no longer privileged. So, in the fourth motion for special discovery, the defense references specific conversations with Roselle Stevenson in which they disclosed an in-person meeting with Catherine Hamlin. They also allegedly disclosed that Miriam Hamblin has not disclosed any abuse, and that Rachel and Eliza no longer fully stand by their prior witness statements from 2012 to 2014. If this is true, investigators within the Utah County Sheriff's Office disclosed the information to a suspect in the criminal case they were investigating, knowing that the discussions would not be privileged because Roselle Stevenson was and is a third party. They basically paved the way for this information to come out to David Lee Hamlin's defense attorneys, Michael Petro and Lee Ashton. Now, in his July 12th, 2023 discovery order, Judge Griffin explicitly stipulated the discussions and documents between investigators and prosecutors and office staffs were work product and therefore privileged, but any documentation of discussions with a third party were not privileged. Even without that, any experienced criminal investigator should have understood this prior to that July 2023 discovery order. They should have structured their conversations accordingly. Instead, it appears that the Utah County Sheriff's investigators engaged in a willful discussion with Roselle Stevenson in which they provided exculpatory information to Stevenson, who was a criminal suspect in the same set of allegations made against David Lee Hamblin, her ex-husband. Now, the Utah County Sheriff's investigators effectively discredited the Hamblin daughters to their mother, who was named as one of their abusers a decade before in the 2012 to 2014 criminal investigation of David Lee Hamblin. In doing so, the investigators provided documented communication that was not privileged and was therefore discoverable by the defense in Hamblin's current case. This is important because Rachel and Eliza are the corroborating witnesses who were present for Emily Sheets' abuse by David Hamblin and Roselle Stevenson. By disclosing any weaknesses within their case to Roselle Stevenson, investigators paved the way for Hamblin's attorneys to access that information and undermine the current case against David Hamblin. Moreover, Judge Griffin has now granted the additional discovery motions filed by the defense, enabling the defense to bring in material from 1999 to 2003 and 2012 to 2014, which the defense clearly intends to use to discredit the two current victims, as well as Rachel and Eliza, as it pertains to the allegations that David Lee Hamblin and Roselle Stevenson are guilty of sexually abusing two additional victims. To recap, the criminal case against David Lee Hamblin has no active prosecutor who can go before Judge Griffin to make any arguments because Judge Griffin predictably denied Ryan Peters' motion to transfer the cases back to Utah County. The question is why Ryan Peters would ever think he would win a motion to transfer the case back to the very prosecutor's office that was conflicted out in the first place due to the relationships between David Levitt and the Utah County Attorney's Office employees. Ryan Peters not only failed to rebut the defense motions by utilizing the taped apology of David Lee Hamblin to his daughter for raping her, he also failed to secure a plausible replacement upon his nomination for a juvenile court judgeship. Now, the Utah County Sheriff's investigators disclosed otherwise privileged information to Roselle Stevenson, a criminal suspect in their current investigations, thereby paving the way for the defense to access damaging information about Rachel and Eliza Hamblin, information that they could use to discredit their corroborating testimony of Emily Sheets' allegations. Now, in conclusion, the government always pleads incompetence to avoid conviction on charges of corruption, and these revelations are consistent with that pattern. Hamblin's attorneys, Michael Petro and Lee Ashton, did not need to be especially competent in this case because the investigators and the prosecutors have done far more damage to their case than Hamblin's attorneys ever could. Additionally, by nominating Ryan Peters to a juvenile court judgeship, Governor Cox has managed to indefinitely delay the proceedings in the Hamblin and Stevenson cases. Out of all of the qualified candidates for judgeships in Utah, Cox chose a man who was the sole authorized special prosecutor in both cases. This is likely not accidental, and we are looking into it. The strategies going forward. So the Hamblin case is not merely a state-level case. It's not specifically confined to Utah. The allegations detail the transport of minors across state lines for the purposes of sexual exploitation and performance, which makes the criminal conduct interstate and therefore federal. Additionally, the abuse occurred across multiple state jurisdictions, including New York, Arizona, Colorado, Florida, Vermont, and Utah. In the wider set of allegations, Hamblin's co-conspirators such as Gordon Bowen are alleged to have transported minors from Utah to New York in a sex trafficking scheme and to have abused children in other jurisdictions. So again, that gives us a federal level of jurisdiction at both the civil and criminal level on this case. So even if the current case, even if the current criminal case against David Lee Hamblin falls apart, the allegations against him and his alleged accomplices within the LDS Church of Satan are so voluminous that the potential exists to uncover additional allegations and bring additional prosecutions in other jurisdictions and at the federal level. That is going to be the focus of investigations in ritual abuse going forward, regardless of what happens in the current two criminal cases against David Lee Hamblin and the criminal case against Roselle Stevenson. We are not letting go of this. So what I would encourage my readers to do is to not be discouraged, but to understand that we have additional avenues available to us. And just within the Utah County Sheriff's Office, there are between 171 and 175 victims and witnesses who detail allegations against David Lee Hamblin and many others. So there is the possibility for additional criminal cases to come out of this. We intend to pursue this and see this for as long as it takes. And to be quite frank with you, we are in a race against time because many of the accused in the Hamblin case are in their late 60s and early 70s. So we are in a race against the clock. We are also looking at their children, and in order to determine whether or not the children of these families have transitioned from being victims or survivors of ritual abuse to become perpetrators of this type of abuse. And so that will be our focus going forward. We hope to see these people prosecuted regardless of what happens in these current cases, and we are going to put our effort towards that. As always, thank you for watching and thank you for reading the Substack. You can reach me with tips or suggestions at 1830GOEL@gmail.com. That is 1830 GOEL 1830GOEL@gmail.com. And as always, thanks for your support and thanks for listening and reading.